Excellent.
I got it, Jay.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, I think the first thing I want to say is hello, Calgary, right? Even though I know a lot of you are not in Calgary, I actually heard a number of people are in Vancouver, and I'm actually planning on moving to Vancouver next year if everything goes well. So I won't be in Denver all that much longer. So I'm going to share my screen here so we can get started. All right. Can you see my screen? Excellent. So this is just a little bit of an introduction of who I am and kind of where I came from. So I've really focused my career around the product side with a lot of Agile organizations. Originally, I got started with a company called Autodesk. If you've heard of AutoCAD or Maya or Fusion 360, that's the parent company of that. They were in the San Francisco Bay Area, so kind of Silicon Valley adjacent. And that was my first experience with Agile. My first job there was to help basically transform their practice from their go-to-market practice took about 6 months, and we wanted to turn that into 5 days. So that was code complete to actually release in 5 days, and found very quickly that that meant an entire organizational transformation, changing expectations around risk and who has empowerment and all of that stuff. Had no idea what Agile was at the time, but that was my first experience really doing an Agile transformation. From there, I later worked at a startup out in Colorado called FitPay, where we were designing a wearable payment solution on par with Samsung and Apple Pay. Really got to learn what a scrappy set of developers can do. We had a team of 12, and if you've ever used Garmin Pay or Swatch Pay, that is our product. Pretty amazing what 12 people can do that are really aligned and driving forward. A few years after that, I joined Scrum Alliance, and ironically, I was there for their Agile transformation as well. But I was the product owner for the practitioner teams. They were actually oriented around personas. So we were dealing with anybody who had a couple of years experience all the way up until they decided to become a coach or trainer. And so part of that, right, I was responsible for the advanced and CSP certifications. If you've ever used the community there, that was what we created to start to really engage with our community. When I started, there really wasn't an online presence at all. When I left, we had 400,000 monthly active users, which was a really big, exciting thing. And that was one of the coolest teams I've ever worked with. If you ever want to talk to me about it, really exciting stuff. Every single person in that company was on a Scrum team. My Scrum team had developers, but it also had customer support and marketing, sales, right? Like everything you could need for an entire business unit. Today, I'm a pretty busy person, so I work with Agile 42. I may actually be working with Superheroes Academy here coming at the beginning of this year. We'll see. I also have my own business called Human Business Culture, and so I really focus around Agile coaching, but more specifically around the product side and helping develop product. I am currently the interim Chief Product Officer for a company called Swift Medical, and I am working with them to basically build out their product organization and help them drive to a brighter future. So that's my business side. You'll see I shared a lot of pictures over here too, because I am very much a athlete enthusiast. I grew up as an alpine ski racer, so you see a picture right over there of me skiing. That's when I was 18 on the national development team in the United States on track to go to the Olympics. Didn't work out, but I've also spent a lot of time doing parkour. So I'm jumping off of a wall there, reading a book. I've climbed the top 58 tallest mountains in the Rocky Mountains. So that's me climbing the mountains. And more recently, I've gotten really into mountain biking and jumping way too big. If I've done the conversion right, I've jumped about 30 meters in distance and done drops of about 6 meters on a bike. And then there's my dog that has absolutely nothing to do with any of that. I just adore my dog. But I share these pictures because one of the things that I'm really passionate about is discovering what's possible. The things that block us, not just in organizations, but personally, and wanting to show what it can really look like when we can move forward and move past those things. I've had some wonderful opportunities to work in some businesses that have been able to do that and really see kind of a brighter future of what work can really look like. And I want to see more of that in the rest of the world. So that's my driving purpose. All right, introduction's done. Thought we would just start off right away with an exercise and kind of get moving here. So I want to role play with all of you. I'm going to be the CEO of a company called Tower Inc. Okay, and what I want all of you to do is form into teams, and I've provided the instructions here, but I want your teams to go and break down this epic into some user stories. And you're going to have 10 minutes to do this. So break it down into some user stories based on this story. As a foreign visitor, I need to see a tower so that oops, there's a typo there. Apologies. I need to see a tower that proves that this country is the most impressive country in the world. I'm specifically saying Canada, right? So then the acceptance criteria, the tower must be big, the tower must be strong, and the tower must be from Canadian stone. And what I want you to do before the end of that 10 minutes is I want you to create a picture of what that tower would look like. You can draw it, you can find pictures online, it doesn't matter, but that's what I'd like you to do. I've also asked for some help on this. So in the room, we have Lisa, online we have Thor and Daniel, who have both agreed to help offer any assistance that you might need in this exercise. So we need to get you the link to the Miro. Make sure we have that. Not sure if everyone has it. And can you help me form some breakout rooms for this?
How many breakout rooms would you like? We've got probably got 15 people.
15?
14 or 15. Looks like
I
Daniel's
got
already
four.
got
Yeah,
four.
I got it on the math earlier. Yeah.
Okay. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, I think teams of more than 3, less than 6 are probably great.
Okay, so they've already started breaking out.
Excellent.
Do you have a timer there?
Let me get one going here if I can get this screen to stop sharing.
And so do you want us to bounce around these breakout rooms?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Yeah, thank you.
So Thor and Gary just bouncing around and trying to be helpful to the rooms.
Sure.
Yes, and please make sure that they're looking at frame 1 there.
Can you share the instructions link?
Yeah, so the instructions are.
Screen?
An engineer in this room? No.
We've only got one that has the mural.
Hey Thor, do you want to jump in room 1? Gary, do you want to take room 2? I'll take room 3.
Will do.
Perfect, thank you.
There we go. Okay, I just had to change my view.
Just double checking
Excellent.
on the right path. You found the way onto Miro?
Yeah, I just don't remember which group. Oh, room 3. Okay, found it.
Yeah, so just grab card 3 there, working on frame 1, the instructions on the top left.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. I'll bounce around and keep going.
I do apologize. I'm just trying to eat dinner, so I might just be watching a bit more than participating on this one.
Oh,
I thought you made like that. Hello, Calgary Agile.
Welcome. Just checking with
Hi.
you. Y'all found your right way there onto the Miro board. Top left is
Enjoying that. Yes.
yeah, and working on card 4.
Yeah.
Slide 1, right?
Yeah, I guess we'd be group 4, right?
Yeah. Okay,
So,
awesome. Just gonna keep bouncing around, just making sure everybody knew what the assignment was.
yeah. How do you see the board, the Miro board?
Hello, we've just started the activity. I'm going to put you into a breakout room. The exercise is to break down this epic into stories. I think there's a bit of confusion.
Yeah, it looks like maybe some Zoom trouble there.
So on the, like what you're expecting is what group 8 is doing, right? That's what you want?
Yes, I do want to make sure. I don't know how to message everyone, but I'd like to make sure that everyone also has time.
Like our group has a question for you as CEO. Do you already have a location for this?
You know what? I think that's actually a better question. I've already kind of given some rundown to the managers. I would ask Lisa. I think Lisa has that information.
I am asking you.
Yeah, I honestly I don't know. Like I wanted Lisa to kind of handle that. If you wouldn't mind talking to her.
No, that's me.
Oh, that is Lisa. Oh.
Welcome, Javier. We've already begun the excitement here. We're going to put you into a breakout momentarily. The exercise is to break down the epic into user stories.
Is that Daniel talking? I can't see the.
Yeah, it's me. I'm sorry.
Okay, cool. Is there a way to remind people, maybe like with 2 minutes left, to make sure to draw a picture or grab a picture of what they think the tower is going to look like?
Sure, I can do that now too.
Awesome.
I'm just going to do a quick bounce around and give everyone a reminder of the timer.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Posted an image.
Just coming up on that last minute, folks. It's coming up on our last minute. It's coming up on our last minute.
29 meters tall. instead of 1 meter taller than Burj Khalifa.
It's coming up on our last minute, folks.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
It's coming up.
maybe I can
This is very fascinating. Just watching how people are dealing with this.
It's always different, right?
A straightened tower pizza. That's great. Taller than 828 meters. That's funny.
So you want to recall them at the timer, right?
Yeah, that'd be great. Be perfect. I'm assuming it's one of those 30-second timers to get everyone back.
It's always a little chop. I do this like all day long, every day. And it's like there's always a 30 seconds where folks are connecting and like the streams are connecting and such.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Also, some groups are ready to leave right away. So as soon as they get the notice, they just leave the room. And then others wait until the last second, right? So
Yep.
it's always a bit of chop.
All right. We have everyone back.
So it looks like we'll have to call the room back.
They'll have to come eventually.
Oh,
Coming back, we're coming back.
Okay.
What?
You want to know?
We're just getting the pictures organized.
All right. Well, it is time for a demo. This should be done with the work at this point.
Maybe go to the online folks first.
Okay. All right, let's check out what you all had.
Sounds like it. Yeah, it could be Utah.
wow.
There's no
Getting some background noise, I think, from the
Red.
meeting room. I don't know if we can mute you.
Here, look at red. Look at like this whole structure around it.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so hello everybody. So just I've been kind of watching what you're coming up with. Boy, you got some really interesting solutions here. Very, very different. So we've got I don't know, is that the CN Tower? Maybe that's a different one.
It looks like it.
This is Calgary Tower.
Calgary Tower. Okay. And we've got
Parliament.
There we go. I was really letting my American show there. I was like, what is that? I can see the flag. Straightened Tower of Pisa. Got a totem. We've got some interesting architecture there. And we've got that actually looks more like Arizona than anything I've seen in Canada, but I could see that being somewhere up north. I'll be honest, I a little surprised. It looks nothing like what I was thinking in my head. Like this feels like we totally missed on what I wanted. I mean, I'm a little worried, right? Like I feel like I was pretty explicit of what I wanted. It feels like I asked for a steak, I got a hairdryer. And yeah, I think we're gonna have to do a lot of rework. And yeah, I think I'm gonna have to really sync up with all of you and try to work with you all to really get clear on what we're doing here. Looks like the main room is back together. I don't know if you are able to show me what you came up with, see if it's similar to what I had in my mind.
So group 7 and 8 on the mural,
Okay,
and then we'll have to post pictures in a minute here.
great. Okay. Yeah, so we're gonna have to do some work, figure out how we're gonna bounce back from this and improve our velocity. I'm gonna share with you kind of what I had in my mind of what this tower is supposed to look like. So this is what I had in my head.
That was my favorite.
I mean, clearly Ryan Reynolds is the greatest person of all of Canada. So I don't know why I didn't see that anywhere. I didn't think I had to be explicit about that. All right, scene. All right, I'm done being CEO. I did this for an intentional reason, right? I have worked with dozens and dozens of companies now, and I've worked with a lot of leaders in agile organizations.
Yeah, you sent it to my phone though, so I'll look it up.
All right, sorry, can we mute the main room again? Sorry, we keep getting some sound in there. So yeah, I keep seeing this kind of interaction where, you know, I'm giving you a little bit of insight into what the CEOs are often seeing, right? Which is they have a solution in their head. They're trying to get some of that solution down to everyone else, right? And they're trying to be agile. They're trying to back off, let teams be empowered and autonomous, but they're not getting what they actually want. And actually that phrase, I asked for a steak and I got a hairdryer, is actually a verbatim quote from one of the CEOs that I worked with. And this is really difficult, right? This is really damaging when we're talking about agile transformations, because what we're really doing is saying, oh yes, we want to let you have freedom, but not the kind of freedom that leads to something that isn't what I really wanted, right? And then suddenly they've lost trust and they start to backpedal, they start to micromanage, you're back into top down, and you're back into the cycle of a struggle. So in order to really, so I think what's really important here, I want to talk about this a little bit. When I worked at Scrum Alliance, one of the things that I wanted more than anything was to find a case study of organizations that had been waterfall and had successfully transformed into what I would consider a success story of an agile organization, right? And I already have some of those ideas of what an agile organization looks like. One that not only kind of follows some of these processes and is very adaptable, but is really effective in their market, right? They understand how to plug into their customers and continuously innovate and innovate in order to survive and do that continuously. The problem is I've been looking for those case studies for years. I have yet to find a compelling one that I can really share as like, this is the example, this is the gold standard of a company that was able to transform. And I've had this conversation a number of times. If someone has one, please send it to me, because I've asked for this from numerous people, including conversations that I've had with scrum.org, and I still have yet to have one of these, right? The reality, though, is that I can still point to organizations that are incredibly agile and are gold standards of what we're trying to live up to. So what's the difference, right? What's the delta between these organizations that's making some of these really successful, and why so many of these organizations, I would say 90+% of agile organizations, are still kind of stuck in this middle ground? I see a hand up from Javier. You want to jump in real quick?
Hey, how are you? How's it going?
Good.
Sorry, I'm also working here, so I'm in a quick break, and I was listening to you, and I have some quick few examples. I'm coming from Colombia, and I've been working for several companies in Colombia, and especially one of these, Avianca, the largest airline. We moved from a waterfall project, big projects, to agile methodology. But we made it like a transition between waterfall to agile. It was not just out of the blue suddenly. with a transition, because especially our customers, our sponsor, and our stakeholders, they didn't understand at the beginning the idea of the agile and how to see the agile will be developed. So we made a transition. For example, we still using the Gantt chart to show the project and the development of the project, the follow-up.
Okay.
But we started working on user stories and all the agile methodology components or artifacts. So it was step by step, not just out of the blue. It's not easy. And also, I know another company is telecommunication company, big one as well, and they move everything from waterfall to agile. But again, no from scratch, from zero. They prepare first the people. They create a train of trainers, stuff like that, and then they move little by little to.
So Javier, I want to be a little careful here, right? And I'd love to follow up with you at the end of what we talk about, right? Because what I'm talking about of a case study of went from waterfall to agile, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily talking about they successfully changed their processes and they consider themselves agile, but I'm talking about really became industry leaders and in innovation, right? Really changed, like maybe these companies are some that we can look at and say, here's a company that used to be waterfall. They're now agile. They're now a gold standard of what these companies should look like. That's kind of what I'm getting at. So let me follow up with you at the end and see if these companies fall in line with what we're talking about. Love to chat with you.
Perfect. Understood. Okay.
Cool. Thank you. So again, kind of what's the delta? What's the big difference between companies like Google and Apple and Netflix and Spotify, right? Versus a lot of these other organizations that I keep running into that say they're agile, but are really kind of struggling to make the kind of impacts that those kind of companies have. I have a hypothesis. I think there's two elements here, and we're going to dig into one of them, right? I think one of them, and we can talk about this maybe separately, but it's values and principles and how they lead with those. And I do mean lead with them, not stick them in a confluence and maybe reference them occasionally, but actually drives the organization. And the other one is what we're talking about today, which is leading with outcomes, right? So I want to open this up to a conversation a little bit here, and we'll just take a couple minutes. Chime in. What do you call, or what do you think of as an outcome? Like, how would you define that?
Was that open to anybody?
Yep, anybody.
The result of an action.
Great. Anyone else?
Well, in terms of project management, it is a result that will be able to deliver value. Like the outcome brings benefits, and then benefits become value. Am I right?
Excellent. Something that creates value.
So probably what I think is the outcomes should be specific and probably more relevant, or can also be measured at a given point in time, and also adds value to your stakeholders.
Yeah. So more value, but also measurability. Yeah.
I would say an outcome is the consequence of an action. May be good, may not be good, but it should give you information, and it's something that's likely to have an impact.
Excellent.
Or hopefully has an impact.
I have a question around measurability. And sometimes I don't necessarily agree with that, because sometimes a lot of the things that we value as humans, I would submit, are immeasurable, right? That's why we say they're priceless, right? Like do you love your kids more today or yesterday or tomorrow or after 20 years or 30 years or when you have grandkids? Does that love change? Like certainly it does, but how do you measure that?
Excellent. How many people have heard the phrase outcomes over outputs? I cannot see
Haven't
very
read
many
the book
faces.
yet.
Fortunately, I can't see very many faces, but in the small group I could see, I saw some hands. Right. So I'm actually really impressed. Way to go, Calgary, because the definition, right, of an outcome is really simple, right? It's an end result. Very, very broad definition. And that's a little bit of a problem, right? So I really want to kind of define why this is a problem, because I've talked to a lot of people. I used to actually, when I did this presentation before, I had a whole quiz, right? And I asked people to tell me which one's an output and what's an outcome, and no one could agree on any of them, right? And so I went to a little bit of a story. So I worked with a contract company that was working with the USDA, and they had 17 teams, okay, and they were a safe organization. They were going into PI planning, and I literally heard every single day, outcomes over outputs, outcomes over outputs. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to them read out all of the outcomes that they wanted for the next iteration. And I counted 183 things that I would call outputs and just one that I would call an outcome. Right. And I was so frustrated. I was like, what is happening here? Like, I went to the release train engineer and I'm like, I thought you were training these people. Like, what's happening? Like, none of these are outcomes. Right. And she kind of nodded along and was like, yeah, I know, we got to fix that. We got to fix that. And then I stopped and went, wait a minute, like, what if their definition of an outcome is not the same as my definition, right? And so I actually went and I talked to my parents. My parents have absolutely nothing to do with product, have nothing to do with sales. My dad was a ski instructor. My mom does referrals at a hospital. And I asked them this question, right? And they gave really similar, right, to the consequences of some actions or an end result. Right? And I was like, because my training with working with a lot of Agile coaches was, an outcome is a change in customer behavior, right? And when I didn't see a change in customer behavior, I thought, well, that's not an outcome. And that's not true, right? So the main point that I want to have here and that I really want to drive home is that when you're talking about outcomes, right, we're going to define what an outcome means to us, what's a valuable definition of an outcome, but that doesn't mean that anybody else shares that definition, right? So I just ask that whenever you're talking about outcomes, that you're having that conversation with people, right? If you hire someone new, you have to have that conversation. If it's been a while, you probably have to rehab that conversation so that everyone's aligned on what's actually important, right? Does everyone agree with that? Is everyone okay with having this conversation and seeing that outcomes is a big, broad word, and to get to what's actually important, we have to have a conversation? I see some nodding heads. So this is what I find an extremely valuable definition of an outcome. So this comes from a book called The Lean Startup by Ann Mei Chang. I'll just give you a couple seconds here to kind of look at what she has there. Okay. So I love this definition, a percent change achieved, right? If you remember nothing else here, I think that's a really wonderful thing to kind of think about, is that when you're talking about what is the product that you're building, that you're trying to like, what's the outcome that you're trying to create, right? Think about it in percentages. Think about the percent change, the rate, right? You do probably need to consider, like, if it's statistically significant, right? If you have 1 and then you go to 2, right? That's a big percent change, but that's probably not that meaningful. So maybe just watch that a little bit. But this really highlights, right, if you're in a software organization, right, the code is what you're doing at the activity level here. The output are the features, right? And the outcomes are the percent change achieved. And this should be informing you about changes in customer behavior. Right? And this is the kind of outcomes that we're talking about with Silicon Valley, right? I named a lot of companies here that are really, really effective at agility and continuously innovate. This is what they mean by an outcome. right? And then of course this leads to impacts, right? The big things that our companies are doing. So I want to tell a quick story about Google. So I'm very lucky. There is a Google office very close to me, and one of my neighbors actually works at Google and happens to be one of the trainers for their OKRs. So OKRs, objectives and key results. This is the thing that Google feels essentially made Google, right? It's all about how do you lead with outcomes? How do you work with teams to create outcomes? And I was really, really excited, like, to sit down and like actually work with real teams who are going through their real OKRs and see what they were coming up with. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to get some great examples and I'm going to stick it in presentations and like, check this out. This is what a great objective and key result is. You can copy this. And the reality is that when they created the objectives and key results, I went, well, these aren't very good. Like, I was surprised. I was like, this is like, I could write a better objective and key result. Like, what's going on? But the more I had these conversations, the more I realized that the quality of what they were writing down was not the important part at all. The important part was that the way in which they were creating things. So their leadership would create the objective, right? This is the qualitative thing that they're looking for, the big, broad, kind of exciting statement of what they wanted to achieve in the next quarter. And then their teams would go and decide, here's how we're going to contribute that to that goal. Here's what we're going to do, right? So they had all the teams go off on their own. They would develop their key results. They would develop their success measures, is another term that you could use for that. And then they would coordinate. They'd talk to the leadership. They'd talk to each other. They would spend tons and tons of time, way more time than any other company that I've seen, just talking about how they were aligning on their objectives, how they were aligning on their outcomes. And that's really what hit me. It was like, it's not about the quality, it's about the communication. It's about the empowerment of letting teams really figure out how they're going to contribute. So I want to break us into the exercise in part 2 here, right? The first one, I showed you kind of how I see most Agile organizations breaking things down. I want to try it more like the way that a Google or a Tesla or a Netflix would do this. So here we have another exercise. And instead of breaking things down into user stories, I want you to break the following goal into measures of success or key results, right? And you can kind of think of this as like, how would you know that you've actually accomplished this goal, right? What things can you measure to say that you've accomplished this goal? So the goal here, to create an amazing architectural experience that inspires foreign travelers to spend time and money in our country, right? In Canada, not my country, but your country. You can kind of forget what we did in the last one for this. You don't need to build off of it. But what I want you to do as part of this as well is, instead of giving me one solution, I want you to brainstorm some ideas, right? Think of some different pictures or drawings that you think you could build that would that you think would meet the objectives and the measures of success that you're coming up with. Does that make sense?
Just from online, can you just give us a thumbs up reaction if that made sense to y'all?
I do see a hand from Eduardo.
Yes. So, Pio, can we have some definitions before we break in some room, break rooms here?
Some definitions?
Yes, because we have like on this goal, we have like some kind of like vague words, kind of like amazing. What define amazing? Define like inspires, like.
Yeah.
So we can create things, but we might be like, again, having different thoughts than you.
So here's what's wonderful. The last one, I was not a good CEO, and intentionally so. Right? And I expected you to somehow read my mind and figure out what I wanted. And in this one, I don't want that at all. I want you to figure out what you think is going to best achieve these things. So yeah, amazing is pretty broad, right? But it's really not up to me what amazing is, right? It's what's important is that the foreign travelers think it's amazing, right? And so part of your job, and you won't be able to do this in this exercise, but if you were to continue developing this, right, you would have to really figure out for yourself, what does amazing look like? So it's really up to you.
How do you want to approach delivering responses?
Sorry?
How do we go about giving you ideas? Do we just blurt them out?
Yep. So I covered it up. Whoops. Come on. I'm trying to rejoin that. So on the Miro board, we'll go back to the Miro board, and in person, feel free to continue doing what you're doing there. But if we scroll to the right, we have this covered up. Somehow someone drew something on there, so we'll just have to delete that. But there you go. So frame 2, this is where you can do that. I put the instructions in the top left there again. And yeah, so that's where you would provide that. And then at the end of 10 minutes again, we'll come back and we'll check out what we have.
So we don't have access to you to ask more pointed questions to understand what those measures might be?
You do. I am going to be available this time. So I can either circle through the breakout rooms, or I can stay here. And if you want to like ask a question, maybe just pop out of the breakout room.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way, if you just stay in the big room and then folks in the breakout, because that way people that are in the room too, Lisa and Tosin, if you can just coordinate any questions with Mike that way too.
Excellent. Sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
We do need the instructions on your screen though, Mike, in the room.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, I've opened up the rooms again.
Again, best of luck. Ask me if you need anything. Happy to help. Stephen, can I help you with anything?
Might be just away from desk. Yeah.
Yeah, just so you know, Daniel, I have never run this experiment with anybody, so it's totally an experiment on my end to see how well this lands.
Okay, yeah, I think it'll be okay.
I'm enjoying it so far.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, my goal is not for my enjoyment. My goal is that people take something from this.
Well, that's usually part and parcel. When you're learning, you're having fun.
Ooh, I forgot to start the timer. Oops. Oh well. Yeah, I think we're running later than I had hoped. So I might have to make an adjustment here on some of the other slides, but oh well.
I'm curious, on a side note, I'm curious about your case study thing. I'm wondering maybe you could send some samples of what you consider as a good case study now, because I have some, I want to write some case studies of some of the work that I've done, and I think that maybe we could change some mind, but it's not, not to the unicorn level yet, but
Yeah, I mean, I'm always looking for case studies myself,
same.
even if they're not the stellar ones, right? Like I think in my mind, right, I've never seen a blockbuster transform into a Netflix, for example. But I've seen examples, but nothing where it's like there's one of those kind of, as you said, like the unicorn, or like a name brand that everyone knows, right? That did this.
The Evermores.
The Evermores.
The Evermores. right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's kind of like this old phrase of like the really agile companies started agile. They didn't become it. Right?
Yeah. Well, that's the Apple Next story in a nutshell, right?
Yep.
They were so lightning hyper focused on just getting there to market that they threw all the norms out the door.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I've actually been having a ton of conversations recently about what is it about Silicon Valley specifically, like the culture and personality of the people there, that might be part of the reason why so many of these companies have started there. It's been kind of fascinating, right? Specifically, like when you're in a hippie culture and you start a company in a hippie culture, why is it different?
Good question. I would suspect that money is a piece of that. If they have access to all those banks out there.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Wow, people are flying on this one. We're 7 minutes and I'm already seeing like a big list of of pretty awesome outcomes here.
See, I wonder, California, maybe they have a special tax incentive that specifically targets tech companies. And that's why so many of them were there for the HQ, right? Like innovation, tax incentives and such.
It's possible. Seems lately that it's actually kind of the reverse. A lot of companies are
That's also
leaving.
why they're getting gutted now, right?
Mhm.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah,
Just
it
throw
could be.
stuff out.
There is a we'll talk about it if we have time. I'm hoping to talk about it, but there is some key principles at those companies that I keep seeing like a pattern that I'm not seeing elsewhere, which is really around the way that they question requirements and authority. And yeah, that's a really big part of Silicon Valley culture is this meritocracy that is I don't see repeated in a lot of other places.
I think it's like an inclusion culture that you're talking about. And I sense that same thing from like that open source world too, that it's hard to nab what that exactly is.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if it's inclusivity. I can actually think of a few examples where I wouldn't really consider them very inclusive, actually.
Oh, really? Well, I mean, inclusive in terms of ideas, right?
Yes, inclusive of ideas, right? I was thinking of inclusive of certain types of people, and I'm like, I don't know about
No,
that.
no. Yeah, no, for sure. The opposite. In some cases, the opposite of that. In fact, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think one of the things that stands out to me is just because a company is agile doesn't mean that they're ethical.
No, absolutely not. It's well, that's like the tool, right? Tool doesn't mean who's the intention behind the wielder, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I think there's a piece there of that visionary humility to let go of that they own all the ideas, right? Like the ideas can come from anywhere. That's it's a core value piece that I run up against often. Once upon a time, we organized the portfolio in such a way that our CEO didn't really have much involvement, and afterwards he shared with me that made him very uncomfortable. Yeah, in fact, that he felt that is not the outcome that he wanted, right? When he wasn't essentially he needed to meddle in the things in order to feel that he was a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really big challenge. I mean, I think the theme here, right, is that Agile really calls upon a very different type of leadership, and difficult to find it, difficult to create it.
Difficult to define it, yeah. difficult to define it in general, right?
A little bit of that, yeah.
I think you'll find that that's not going to get any easier either. You know, when I listen to the talks from Simon Sinek around Navy SEALs and the Marines, they talk about the same things. When you ask the trainers at the SEALs, you're like, who's the best? Who do you guarantee going to make it through your program? They'll say, no, that's not how this works. Right? Like our best leaders, they could be like the nerdiest guy sometimes. It could be the this guy, that guy, whatever. But what I can tell you is who won't make it.
There you go.
Right? So I was like, okay, that's interesting.
That's something. Hey, Thor.
Mike,
Yes.
when you say build, what do you mean by build?
What do I mean by build?
Yep. So brainstorm ideas of what you could build. Are you talking like a prototype, a wireframe? Because some people are just answering.
Yeah.
Not nobody's drawing anything, right?
Well, it's funny because I was thinking like, yeah, throw some pictures on there or draw some things.
But nobody
actually,
is, and so we're a bit confused when you say what you could build that would meet the objective.
Yeah. So here's the funny thing. I actually like what they're doing better than what I had in my mind.
Oh,
I think this is cooler. I'm enjoying this more.
okay.
So,
I'll go back and tell them that.
So yeah, tell them you did something different and Mike likes it.
Let it ride.
Oh, they actually do some pictures. Okay, so we got a mix there. Oh, interesting. Oh, man. Okay, I don't know how people are going to feel at the end of this, but this is going better than I actually hoped. And I thought it was going to go well. So I'm happy.
That's also one of those essential pieces I find in the practice that you're talking about, is there's always a bit of messiness that people are just willing to work through in the initials settings, right? It's like nobody really is clear on the thing and they just sort of figure it out.
Yeah.
But there's always a period of that figuring it out that's essential. And sometimes in the traditional setting, they just skip right over that because they're like, here's the things and we already know everything.
Ask you a question, Mike?
Right? Oh,
yes. Done.
It's on the board here, so it might be okay. We're trying to figure out the difference between what you're thinking for the brainstorm ideas versus measures of success. We've got lots of measures that we would want to see as results. So how does the brainstorm ideas, pictures or drawings fit into that?
So far I love what you all are doing. But essentially, right, what you're brainstorming are ideas that you think could contribute to that, right? So they're kind of experiments, but you think like, okay, so right, maybe I think I saw one on there about an NPS score, right? High NPS is one of the things that you want. So then you go, okay, well, what could we test, right? Maybe you build something and you find out like, hey, what does this actually create a high NPS score?
Okay.
Does that help?
So some of our ideas around maybe where we would want to so we could do an experiment to baseline what our NPS score is if we're building something new, where we get, and then see what we can build from there. Okay. How do I get back into my to my room?
Well, sadly, we actually just hit the timer, so I think everyone's now coming back.
Nuts.
But we'll talk about
what.
I'll tell them in our next breakout. I'll tell them what we. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
No
I'll ask sooner next time.
I may just ask you, Don, to just re-ask that question, and I'll answer it with everyone. So.
But you have to act genuinely surprised when she asks it, like you've never heard it before.
Will do.
Oh, now I gotta remember what I said.
Well, if you change it, I'll still be surprised. So
okay. Well, yeah, and it'll be genuine. Do you want me to ask now? Is everyone back?
Not quite. Just give everybody a few more seconds to file back in. Take it away, Don.
So our group had a question. We came up with lots of ideas on how we could measure our success, but we weren't quite sure what was expected in the brainstorm and how we would use that brainstorm to tie into our measures of success.
What a surprising question. Sorry for anyone that missed that. She asked this question earlier, and I have to act surprised. So it's a really wonderful question, and I do want to say that I'm really impressed with what you came up with. Right away, I saw outcomes from every team that were like, "Yep, that's great. Like that's measurable. That's really going to tell us, how is it making a difference." And then I'm seeing all of these things in the brainstorm ideas that to me are hypotheses, right? They're all of these things that now you can go out and actually test and see if they're going to hit your outcomes. Right. And that's a very different experience than before. It was like, oh, just make something that the CEO wants, and you're trying to figure out how to read my mind. Now that the success measure is the thing driving what you're actually doing and what you're building, right? And now the job shifts from building the thing that I'm asking for to discovering what's actually going to work, right? And actually achieve the key or the objectives that are important here. Does that make sense? Outcomes, right? And so like this is a huge difference, right, from what I see most teams doing and what I see some of these really agile organizations doing, because leadership is taking a very different role here. Instead of saying, here's what I want you to do, figure out a way to do it, they're saying, here's the outcome that I'm looking for, like the big kind of desired end state, and I have no idea what the goal is, but you're all smart. I want you to go figure out what ideas you can come up with. And then, right, success is make sure that you're moving the numbers, not pleasing me, right? That's a huge difference. So you all did amazing. And I want to check in with you, like how it felt, the difference between the first exercise and this exercise.
I didn't question my sanity as much.
The first exercise was more open to ideas, but this one was more like focusing on the key results or measures of success, which makes it more like focused.
I think this exercise was definitely more relatable to most of us because we all travel, so we kind of know the industries and the topics rather than what is in somebody's head. So it was less ambiguous for us all.
It's weird. It's like you all have an idea of what's important to people better than an American does.
Yeah, kind of retrospective here. Probably this exercise we should have done first because we can connect with the purpose and the outcome of stuff, why we are doing that. And then the first exercise is about like, okay, the what probably will be easier because then we will have aligned before the purpose or the metrics we want to achieve.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is a really good point, right? In the first exercise, we created user stories, and pretty much from the start, right? You had an epic that was defined kind of loosely as a user story, and you broke it down into smaller user stories. And here we're starting really with ideas. And from here, right now, you can build your user stories from these ideas. But it's a very different place that it's coming from, right? Here you have the opportunity to create the user stories from your team, whereas before, user stories were kind of dictated from the top, right?
The other thing that I liked about it is starting with those measures. It's much easier so in the first exercise, it's really easy to get into that thought of build it. In the second exercise, we could test some of those with paper prototypes. We could not go and build an architectural thing that doesn't actually add value, but we could go and test it with people and see, did they like this idea or did they like that idea? So I like that as well. Less investment, more feedback quickly.
The art of maximizing the work that you don't do.
I think the first time when we went to the breakout session was more to do with there was already an instruction that was being provided on what we wanted to do, and then we were being curbed with ideas of we were curbed in terms of what we are supposed to do. But then I think in the second breakout, it was more to do with come up with more ideas, and and try to kind of relate to the the outcome that we are talking about. Be it the architectural design, or and how it's going to be exponentially bringing in people to attract more people. So you were able to then build up more ideas and then trying to converge into the actual outcome. So there may be multiple channels to do things, but then it is all tied up to the outcome.
Yeah. Awesome. So I initially started with probably 3 hours worth of topics. I tried to get it down to an hour, and I'm now realizing I still have probably an hour and a half. So I don't think I'm actually going to be able to cover everything that I wanted to, but I think we covered the most important stuff. I do want to highlight, right, that I did put together, that I did put together a list, right, of different principles that I've seen of what makes great outcomes. And I want to be able to share this with you. So if you're interested in understanding more, there's a lot of little details here, little tips that'll help you understand what actually creates great outcomes, what these organizations are doing. Again, I don't think we really have time here to cover all of that, but this is a little bit of highlight. I will say one thing, right? And this is an area where you're doing a fantastic job. So I had lunch with Jim Highsmith earlier this week. And if anyone's not familiar with who Jim Highsmith is, he is one of the co-authors of the Agile Manifesto. We had a long lunch together, and I asked him before I came in here, if there's one thing that you could tell everyone about the topic of leading with outcomes, what would it be? And he said specifically, if you can't measure it, it's probably not an outcome. So I did just want to kind of share that one piece of value with you. The other thing that I would love to just kind of share here as well is like kind of this phrase here, right? What you measure most often is what gets done. And I think one of the mistakes that I see so often when it comes to leading with outcomes is that they kind of just sit somewhere, right? They sit on a board or in a Confluence page, right? And it's like, okay, we have an outcome, check, forget about it, right? But outcomes should be driving the conversation all the time. So you should be talking about it at least every sprint. I try to talk about them every single week, right? How are we tracking towards it? What's moving? What's not? What can we change to get there, right? This should really be the thing that helps focus teams and allows for those pivot conversations. The one thing I still wanted to ask you all is, how will you help your org focus more on outcomes? What thoughts do you have?
Understand the KPIs more.
Understand the KPIs more? You said?
Yeah.
I would want to make sure we have clear discussions about the strategy, what those strategies are intended to accomplish, because ultimately those are the outcomes you want. And if there's no strategy, that's probably a good place to start.
Yeah, I find that as much as a lot of executives talk in solutions, right? A lot of times they're trying to clarify things for people. But if you actually have the conversation, like, what is it that you're really trying to get out of this? And start to understand, like, again, what is the outcome that they're really looking for out of that they tend to really appreciate that. And they have more confidence when they understand, like, oh, that's what we're trying to accomplish, right?
I would say less feature teams, more focus on discovering the unmet needs from users, and then empower the product team to solve this problem instead of listening to senior executives.
Yeah. Yeah, our job is to solve problems for customers, right? Customers don't care what features we build. They do care that we're solving problems for them.
In my opinion, I think the most important thing is what is the minimum viable product? I mean, basically, you might have like hundreds of ideas, but then start with small and then slowly build on the features on top of it and then make it as a wholesome.
Yeah, I think when you start to have measures, right, and you can bring this to your teams, independent of the organization, but if you start measuring the outcomes, right, you can actually start testing those things and showing pretty quickly, right, if this idea is actually working or not. And that creates a great base to have that conversation of, hey, we were planning on building these features, but we can now see that it's actually not going to move what we're trying to move as a company, right? Or maybe it is, right? And there you go. Now go full steam into it, right?
I'd say a really common one, and I kind of borrow from SAP back in the day. They have this idea that when you do implementations or transformations, one of the critical things for success is inclusion of the end user in order to get them to adopt the system, right, in the design of it, right? So kind of the same thing here. I would take that even one step deeper nowadays and say customer centricity. So understanding the customer and actually bringing them to demo, making them part of the design process, that is so critical. If you can just bring them in once a year, even, yeah, like once over none, is you'll see profound changes in the way that you see those things.
Yeah, one of my colleagues, Mike Knight, I love the comment you said. He said it's really hard to build a product badly if you check in with your customers enough. Like they'll tell you what's wrong. So just kind of some other points here that I was thinking of, right? Starting small, right? I wouldn't try and do this across the whole organization all at once. It can be very difficult and challenging, but start small and start to show how it works with maybe one team. And then less is more, right? Especially early on. So I would even say, right, choose your number one goal and choose your number one measure of success and just focus on that and see how that works. Okay, I gotta ask you this question. It's just fun. We're kind of wrapping up here. So I always enjoy this one. I do look at SpaceX as one of the companies that has done a pretty incredible job. They've completely disrupted the entire space industry, right? And we can kind of see their outcomes at work here and how they drive. In fact, if you ask, one of the software engineers that I worked with at FitPay actually just finished 5 years working at SpaceX. So I had a great conversation with her about what goes on there, right? And if you ask her who the manager is, they say it's the outcomes, right? That's what they're really accountable to more than anything. So the mission at SpaceX is to make life multiplanetary, right? That's the impact. Their objective or the outcome is to reduce the cost to send payload to orbit. And the way that they are measuring that, or their success measure, right, is to reduce the cost of sending 1 kilogram to orbit to less than $100 US. So now the question, just a random guess here. Can you guess what it cost in the 1980s with the space shuttle? And can you guess what it is currently right now?
Kilogram?
For 1 kilogram, yeah. What's the price to send it into orbit?
Probably 100-fold, so $1 million per kilogram.
In the 80s or today?
In the 80s, and now I don't know what it is. Just guessing.
Yeah. Anyone else want to take a stab? All right. Well, I'll share it with you. So in the 1980s, it cost $65,000 per kilogram. It's not quite as much as you were saying, but still a lot. Today, it costs $1,500 with SpaceX, which is about a 98% improvement. And by the way, they actually just made their goal even harder. They now want to do it $10 per kilogram as their new goal. So it's really, they've already completely changed the economics of putting things into orbit and are now going even further with it. It's pretty amazing. By the way, SpaceX put more kilograms into orbit last year than everybody else in the entire world combined by a lot.
So you say there's a market opportunity to clean up space now.
Yes, there is. Yes, that is very true. I think SpaceX is trying to corner that market too, but we'll put it up and then we'll take it down, right? We had a little conversation here earlier that just because you're agile doesn't mean you're ethical, right? And that may not align with your ethics that they're doing that, but that is something to consider too. Okay, so I really, really appreciated it, everyone. Like, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure for me. I really enjoyed watching you work through those exercises. I did want to share a little feedback mechanism here. If you can give your thoughts on that, that would be super helpful for me. I would love to continue to grow this conversation with others, potentially bring this to some of the conferences. So that would really be helpful to me if you could share your feedback. And I will put that in the chat for you. If I can find my chat, which I just clicked on it and I'm not seeing it. There we go. And then lastly, if you want to connect with me, I've listed a couple things there. I did post my LinkedIn earlier in the chat. If you want to connect with me there, you have my email there. There's 2 QR codes as well, which will bring you to different ways to connect with me. So if you want to use your phone to just kind of grab that, happy to connect with you, happy to continue these conversations and help out however may be. And then on the right there, I've put in some wonderful, wonderful resources on books to help on these topics. Measure What Matters by John Doerr really explores kind of this introduction at Google of how he brought OKRs there and how it evolved from originally what's called management by objective, which I don't recommend, but is work at Intel as well. Escaping the Build Trap by Melissa Perry really goes into this idea of product-led organizations and how they lead with outcomes and not just the feature factory, right? Empowered by Marty Kagan. I find this one be a little bit funny. I find that a lot of people will agree with it, whether or not they understand what he's saying. And then Radical Focus by Christina Wadke, which is really focused on OKRs specifically, and the focus that they can bring. And that really goes into details of how you would break OKRs down. That said, I think if you start with objectives or goals and try to measure, like, how would you know that's true? I think you're going to do fantastic. So as a start.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciated. I'm just looking at the time here. Normally we'd open it up for a bit of a Q&A. But if anybody has maybe just 1 or 2 questions, we can go from there. I don't see any hands up in on the online. Anybody in the room, Lisa?
They're not making eye contact.
I have one question, Mike, and thank you so much again for your time and sharing this very insightful exercise. So when we have the chance to connect with with a slight theoretical agile approach, we always hear about, like, in average a sprint, for instance, will be like 2 weeks length, between 2 weeks and 4 weeks. And then when we have the chance to read like this kind of books like Empower, we feel like it's not enough, and product company, probably like the big 4 will how to say, will be highlighted as, they have the really focus on iteration, and probably within a week they can prototype, discover, and validate a lot of ideas. So what is your thought, and why do you believe what's happening in these kind of companies that can really execute in this kind of pace and speed, and be very effective at the same time?
Yeah, so I appreciate the question. I hope I understood it correctly. It's a little bit hard to hear in the room for me. But yeah, I mean, Tesla, for example, they release code to production 2 to 3 times a day, right? That's so much faster than a lot of agile organizations doing Scrum on these cadences, right? Like, they don't do Scrum because they think it's too slow, as an example. A lot of organizations are slower, and then there's multiple reasons for that, right? I think the first question that I almost always ask is, why do you want to be agile, right? What's the point of what you're doing? and get some clarity around like, how fast do you actually want to get changes out to customers, and how often do you want to test them, right? From there, right, I think a big part of it is really thinking about, your ability to continuously deploy, creating that pipeline where that's even possible to create those kind of fast feedback loops. That said, right, like there's lots of ways to test and prototype without doing code. So one of the things, like I had this experience when I was at Scrum Alliance, we were designing a game for people to learn about Scrum. And when we used paper prototyping, so we just had people in the room and we had Post-it notes, and we created literally 5 different iterations of the game within just a few hours, and tested each one and learned from each one, and actually created a really fun game with it. So there's different ways that you can discover what's really important without even writing code. And that'll kind of give you an idea of like, make sure, if you're going to have a long development cycle, at least you can make sure you're doing the right stuff. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks so much.
Great. I love product discovery, by the way. I teach product discovery with this guy, David Pereira. So if you ever want to hop into a class on product discovery, he's been really good. He did almost all of the legwork to get it going. I'm just kind of jumping in and helping out at this point, but really fantastic class.
All right.
Awesome.
Question.
Ooh.
The spelling of
Yes.
that doesn't look right, but before
You're
everybody
right.
goes, do you want to correct that?
I do. Thank you.
Where can we
misspell
join
your
that
name?
class?
Sorry?
Where can we join that class?
I have to check with him on when he's doing his next one. It just wrapped up the last cohort. And I'm not sure. So they've been doing it kind of midday in the US. He's been teaching mostly European audiences. But if you want to send me a message, I can get back to you and tell you when the next one is for sure.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mike.
Yes.
Appreciate you joining us and investing your time with us. And thank you so much to those online and in the room for investing your time here as well, and learning a little bit more about outcomes. I started writing some stuff down that I gotta go talk to a few people at work about, but that's a different thing. So thank you so much. And I'm just gonna take over sharing for a second, so the people in the room can see. Oh, I'll have to ask you to stop. There we go. I'm just gonna share. All right.
And one request from me, I already kind of shared this out. I'd love to share with you the slide deck, and I actually have another sheet that I worked on a while back that again kind of breaks down all the like little helpful tips and things like that, like a little cheat sheet for outcomes that I can also provide.
All right, for those in the room, this is our QR code that we like to show out every time. So just like Mike is looking for feedback, we're looking for feedback too on how we can make Calgary Agile more relevant, enjoyable, and so that we just keep getting you to come back for all these great sessions. So again, thanks everybody for showing up. Our next session will be November 9th. The title is Agile at AWS, an Insider's Perspective with Thor. How do you say Lucas's last name?
K2.
One more time.
K2.
Everybody got that?
Lucas,
we'll be putting out the invite pretty soon. So again, for those in the room, please use the QR code for feedback. For those that are online, Dan had already shared it. So again, thank you so much for coming out. Thanks again to Mike, and we'll see everybody next time.
Thank you.
Gary. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.